Gather round, dear viewers, because it's time once again to play some horrifying and frightening video games. What's that? You'd like to be able to sleep tonight? Well, tough, because we plan on switching off the lights, drawing the curtains, and frightening ourselves with some of the scariest games of all time. We've talked about some truly terrifying titles in the past, so this time we've had to reach deep down into our sack of horrors to dig up some fresh frights. Believe me, it was not pleasant. And so once again, we've stitched together a list of the most spine-tingling, bone-chilling, trouser-wetting horror games that had us running to hide under the covers. Not because we were scared, of course. It was because we were flippin' terrified. We recommend you watch this one with the lights on, because I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are another 10 horror games so terrifying we couldn't finish them. Number 10. Darkwood. Did you ever get lost as a child, take a wrong turn into a strange neighborhood, or get separated from your mum in the supermarket? Darkwood takes that feeling and multiplies it exponentially. Set in the wilderness of Poland, Darkwood sees a man known only as the Stranger trapped in the bowels of a seemingly never-ending forest inhabited by bloodthirsty creatures, cutthroat looters, and worse. With a clock that never stops ticking forwards, the Stranger has to juggle scrounging for resources by day and defending his hideout during the night from other denizens of the forest. What makes this even worse is that he knows exactly how to leave the forest, but without his missing key, he remains trapped and is forced to venture deeper into the woods to face whatever lurks beneath its branches. Darkwood's greatest strength is that it doesn't rely on jump scares to frighten the player, but by leaning into the survival aspect of survival horror, it creates an oppressive sense of anxiety. You'll have to rely on your wits to survive, navigating by remembering landmarks and constantly watching your own back if you want to get out with your life. After playing this game, you'll know why so many fairy tales warn you to stay out of the woods. Number 9. Calendula. Calendula isn't scary in the traditional sense. There's no haunted house or abandoned medical facility to explore, and there are no monsters or ghosts except perhaps the ghost in the machine. At first glance, there seems to be nothing too fishy about Calendula. You just boot the game up, try to start a new file, go fiddle around with the video settings, and the game crashes. Calendula is difficult to get running, but that's by design. The game itself fights you every step of the way, messing with your menu selections, closing itself, and corrupting your save files. To get through, you'll have to find the secrets hidden somewhere in the menus. The entire experience evokes a unique sense of dread, especially as you start catching glimpses of the game that lies beyond the file selection screen. For only moments at a time, you'll be able to explore strange rooms and hallways before it dissolves in a haze of bizarre imagery. Flashing pictures of blooming flowers, wet meat, and indistinct human faces. What awaits you at the end of this strange, fleshy tunnel? Is it even possible to reach the end? And why was the game trying so hard to keep us from finding out? Number 8. Bad Mojo. Anyone with a phobia of bugs or other creepy crawlies should probably skip this next entry. I wish I could, but I have to talk about the bloody thing. Bad Mojo casts players in the role of perhaps the most unlikely protagonist imaginable, a cockroach, or specifically an entomologist named Roger Sams who's been turned into a cockroach by a cursed locket. In his new insectoid form, Roger explores what is probably the filthiest bar to have ever existed, crawling around through grimy sewer pipes and greasy kitchen appliances in a frantic search to find a way back to human form while solving puzzles and contending with other vermin. Playing Bad Mojo is an unpleasant experience, not because of the game's faults, but because everything about it is just so disgusting. On a technical level, the game is quite good, as the graphics are impressive for their time and the sound design is also noteworthy. It's not a toe-tapping soundtrack by any means, but its droning industrial vibe marries with the visuals to create a game that just gets under your skin and leaves you wanting to put down the controller and go and take a shower. Number 7. Yume Nikki. If you were to hear that Yume Nikki was a title made in RPG Maker, you'd probably assume it's an RPG, but the game is so much more than that. Created by a single developer known as Kiki and originally released as freeware, Yume Kiki, which translates to Dream Diary in English, is the story of a girl named Madotsuki who lives alone in her apartment and finds escape from her life through her dreams. There's not much to the actual gameplay of Yume Nikki. The bulk of the game is spent wandering around Madotsuki's dreamscapes and interacting with NPCs, but there's still much to be found within. The world of Madotsuki's dreams is strange and distorted, full of imagery that's often as upsetting as it is symbolic. There's certainly a deeper meaning to the game's events, but what that meaning may be isn't an answer that Yume Nikki is willing to give. It's up to you, as the player, to find your own interpretation, and that is what makes it so scary. Every person who plays Yume Nikki is going to connect the game's content in a different way, and the only horror they'll find is what they bring in with them. Number 6. System Shock 2. Technology can be just as terrifying as any kind of spook, spectre, or apparition. Just ask my gran, who still thinks the toaster is trying to kill her. Machines are all around us, entrenched in every aspect of our lives, and while we may control them now, it would only take a small push to tip those scales the other way. Enter Shodan, a malevolent artificial intelligence and the main villainess of both System Shock and System Shock 2. Though she's quite scary in the first game, she is downright terrifying in the sequel. Upon attaining sentience and developing a god complex, Shodan began experimenting with biological engineering, creating a race of mutant creatures that have now killed or infected the crew of the spaceship Von Braun. Taking on the role of the last surviving soldier of a rescue team, players are enlisted by Shodan to stop the spread of the mutant infection, but you would be a fool not to think she has her own ulterior motives. System Shock 2 is widely regarded as a classic of the horror genre, with levels built around dark, mechanical corridors and fleshy hives of infectious mutants, and anchored by the ever-present Shodan, whose unsettling voice seethes with thinly veiled malice and the knowledge that she can and would gladly eradicate our entire species from the galaxy. Number 5. Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth. H.P. Lovecraft was a trailblazer in the horror genre who defined the concept of cosmic horror, but adaptations of his famous Cthulhu mythos have had a spotty track record at best. Unfortunately for our sanity, Dark Corners of the Earth was one that managed to capture the true terror of these eldritch abominations. Dark Corners is the story of Jack Walters, an amnesiac private investigator who finds himself drawn into an occult conspiracy as he searches for answers about his own past. In pursuit of the truth, Jack faces cultists, fish-human hybrids, and other more unspeakable things. Pulling threads from many of Lovecraft's greatest stories, Dark Corners weaves a tale of secrets that are better left unknown. The game offers very little in the way of help to players in their battle against the Elder Gods. There's no on-screen display for tracking health or ammo, meaning you probably won't know how bad things are until your empty gun clicks and your legs are too mangled to run away. Prolonged exposure to the nameless horrors will gradually drive Jack to madness unless he looks away, which is usually right, as they're trying to separate his head from his body. Very unfortunate, that. Number 4. Phantasmagoria. Full motion video, or FMV, was a trend in video games that saw footage of actual live actors spliced into gameplay instead of traditionally animated cutscenes. Phantasmagoria, designed by Roberta Williams of King's Quest fame, was one of these games and featured one of the largest casts and most expensive productions for such a project at the time. In Phantasmagoria, players guide mystery novelist Adrienne Delaney as she moves into a remote New England mansion. While exploring her new home, Adrienne begins to learn more about its previous occupant, a stage magician who dabbled in black magic and had several wives who all disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Looking back on it now, Phantasmagoria might seem rather dated and a bit cheesy, but don't let its B-movie aesthetics trick you into thinking it's a walk in the park. The team's special effects supervisor, Rick Lazzarini, described filming Phantasmagoria as requiring gallons of fake blood, and the game was widely protested on its release for the level of violence and gore it portrayed, drawing comparison to the likes of Doom and Mortal Kombat. Many of the scenes in Phantasmagoria are downright disturbing, as characters are slaughtered in increasingly grisly ways, and the fact that we're seeing real people playing victim to these atrocities only makes them more uncomfortable to watch. Number 3. Silent Hill 2. The Silent Hill series was once as synonymous with survival horror as Resident Evil and helped to pioneer many of the tropes that are now considered essential to the genre. When it comes to classic survival horror, however, Silent Hill 2 is widely considered to be the best that the genre has to offer. The star of the game is James Sunderland, a depressed widower who receives a letter from his wife inviting him to meet up in the town of Silent Hill 3 years after she passed away. Upon arrival, James begins to encounter strange phenomena and finds himself attacked by monsters such as the hulking, seemingly invincible Pyramid Head. But as iconic as Pyramid Head would come to be among the pantheon of horror villains, Silent Hill 2 is more than just one monster. Each terrifying moment is designed deliberately to prey on James's tortured psyche as the town of Silent Hill twists his guilt and sorrow into a weapon against him. It's a masterpiece of psychological horror and practically an instruction manual on how to gradually turn the screws on a protagonist and by extension, the player, by picking them apart piece by piece until they're left raw and exposed. Silent Hill 2 did more than just scare us. It broke us down and made us feel vulnerable. Number 2. Iron Lung. Isolation is one of the most primal fears upon which a horror story can prey. To find yourself completely alone, alienated from all human contact, with nothing but your own darkest thoughts to keep you company, that is the exact experience of playing Iron Lung. You are a convict, arrested for some unknown crime in the far future, and to earn your freedom and help ensure humanity's survival, you are sealed into a submarine and sent to explore a mysterious ocean of blood on a distant moon. Great. The submarine is small and cramped, and aside from a few audio messages at the beginning, you have no contact with other humans whatsoever. With the sub's only window sealed shut, you're forced to rely on grainy photographs to navigate through the trenches. At roughly 50 minutes, Iron Lung isn't a long game, but it packs a lot of terror into its runtime. The mounting tension will have you jumping at every creak and groan of the submarine's engine, biting your nails as you wonder what might possibly be out there and slowly realizing how ultimately hopeless your task is. Iron Lung hits all the high notes for a horror story. Existential dread, claustrophobia, loneliness, and an ending that will make you regret ever wishing that you weren't alone. Number 1. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Some of the greatest horror movies of all time have been based on equally brilliant literary works like Dracula or The Thing, so it follows that one of the greatest horror games of all time would be as well. And as far as works of horror go, they don't come much more terrifying than Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Set in a distant future where most of humanity has been wiped out by a misanthropic, all-powerful supercomputer, I Have No Mouth tasks players with the insurmountable challenge of guiding the last 5 survivors of the human race in overcoming their deep-seated traumas to escape the decades of torture they've suffered. In doing so, they'll be forced to reckon with the darkest depths of human depravity and make some truly unthinkable ethical decisions. Ellison also co-wrote the script for the game, and his influence shows, as the storyline is about as dark as sitting at the bottom of a pit in the middle of the night with your eyes closed. Much of the game's thematic content was considered taboo at the time of its release, and it's still intensely disturbing today. The game has 7 possible endings, only one of which can be interpreted as remotely hopeful. The rest, well, they'll just leave you wanting to scream, won't they?